In my sophomore year, I was lucky enough to snag a single dorm room. It was tucked away in a corner, secluded from the rest of the dorms. You had to turn a corner even to see my door. It was the perfect balance of social interaction and privacy. A few weeks into the semester, while I was engrossed in studying for a biology exam, a faint tapping on my door broke the silence. It was so light that I almost missed it. I called out, inviting whoever it was to come in, but the door remained shut. I got up to open it, but found no one there. I shrugged it off as a prank and left my door open, returning to my studies. No one came back. The next night, just as I turned off my lamp to sleep, the tapping returned. This time it was louder, more like a knock. I called out but got no response. I quickly got out of bed and opened the door, but again, no one was there. The next morning, I asked my dorm mates if they were messing with me. Everyone denied it. The following night, I was jolted awake by a loud knocking on my door. I hesitated, then decided to confront the prankster. I flung the door open, but the corridor was empty. This time, I sprinted down the corridor and saw someone disappearing around the far corner. I gave chase, but only saw a bathroom door closing at the end of the hallway. I pushed open the bathroom door, ready to confront the Joker. The bathroom was empty. I checked the stalls and saw a pair of heavy black boots in one of them. I pushed the stall door open, but there was no one there, just the boots. Then I heard a creepy giggle. It wasn't a childlike giggle, but a sinister laugh that sent chills down my spine. I bolted back to my room, locked the door, and jumped into bed. I texted all my friends, but everyone was asleep. The knocking happened once more that night, but I ignored it. The next day, I asked everyone on my floor about the knocking. No one else had heard it, and everyone swore they weren't pranking me. I never found out who was behind the knocking, but the boots and the creepy laugh suggested it was an older man. To this day, the memory of that night sends shivers down my spine. It was the inaugural week of my freshman year at the University of Southern Mississippi. I was just beginning to feel at ease with my roommate, a guy hell-bent on joining a fraternity. Rush Week was on the horizon, and the parties were kicking off that Thursday. My roommate, not wanting to venture alone, asked me to accompany him. Even though I had no interest in fraternities, I was game for the parties. After all, I was at a party at school. My roommate had a plan. We would hit a low-level frat party on Thursday and then explore other frats over the weekend. His logic was to have a fallback frat in case the top ones didn't bid him. The frat house we were headed to was far from campus, nestled in a run-down downtown area. The house was nothing like you'd imagine a frat house to be. It was a corner house, and if it weren't for the loud music and parked cars, you'd never guess it was a frat house. We were welcomed by a short, chubby guy, drenched in sweat, holding a solo cup. The party was in a dimly lit room, crammed with about 50 guys. It was sweltering, and to make matters worse, there were hardly any girls. I endured the party for about 20 minutes, engaging in awkward conversations with one socially awkward guy after another. I signaled my roommate that it was time to leave, but a group of guys blocking the door made us reconsider. To kill time, I continued drinking their cheap beer. After about 5 cups, a burly guy handed me a tiny bottle, promising it would get me wasted. He watched me as I downed the 2 shots worth of hard liquor, and then he started a one-sided conversation. Things started to blur, and I felt dizzy. The room seemed to darken, and then everything went black. I woke up in a dark room, lying in a bed. The muffled sound of music told me I was still in the frat house. The room was dark, but I could make out some furniture and a small closet door. Over the loud music, I heard the sound of a plastic bag being crunched in the closet. I bolted out of the room, found my roommate, and we left the house. On our way back to campus, I told my roommate I believed I was drugged. He wanted to call the cops, but I convinced him it was pointless. He then asked me an uncomfortable question. Was I violated? I didn't feel any pain, and my clothes were intact, so I assumed not. When I checked the time, I realized I had only been out for about 10 minutes. Whatever the guy gave me must have been a dud, thank God. That was my terrifying experience of attending an underground frat party, and it remains the scariest experience of my life. My first year at university, I was all excited, fresh out of high school, ready to start my new life. I had just finished unpacking my stuff in my dorm room when my roommate arrived. His name was Dave. Right from the get-go, I knew something was off about him. He was the most socially awkward person I'd ever met. I introduced myself, reached out to shake his hand, but he just stared at it, didn't say a word. I had to ask him his name, and even then, he barely spoke. We tried to make conversation, but it was like pulling teeth. All he ever said was yes or no. We ended up just sitting in our rooms, not talking to each other. It was awkward, man, really awkward. I decided to go to student housing and request a new roommate. I thought Dave was just a really awkward kid, but I soon found out he was much more than that. I met some of the other kids on my floor, and they seemed cool. We hung out, checked out the campus, and had a good time. When I got back to my dorm that night, Dave was still in the same spot. He hadn't moved an inch. I turned off my desk light and went to bed, hoping things would get better, but they didn't. I woke up around 4 a.m. to find Dave standing over me, just standing there staring. I freaked out, asked him what the hell he was doing. He just looked at me, then went back to bed. The next morning, Dave was gone. I went to orientation, tried to forget about the weirdness of the night before, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong with Dave. A few days later, the police showed up. They asked me about Dave, about his behavior. I told them everything. They thanked me, then went to Dave's room. They came out a few minutes later, escorting Dave out of the building. He didn't resist, didn't say a word, just went with them. I found out later that Dave had a history of mental illness. He had stopped taking his medication, and his parents had reported him missing. They were relieved to find him, but I was just shocked. I couldn't believe what had happened. I got a new roommate after that, a normal guy named Mike. We got along great, but I'll never forget Dave. I'll never forget the fear, the confusion, the relief when he was finally gone. I was a student at the esteemed Boston University. Quickly, I found myself in the midst of a lively group of friends, and our weekends were filled with adventures. One chilly Friday night in October, when our group had no grand plans, two of my closest companions decided to explore the university's secluded nature reserve by the lake. There was a hidden clearing on the far side of the lake, perfect for bonfires, shielded from the prying eyes of the university and campus security. It was a secret haven where students would occasionally gather to indulge in forbidden pleasures. This spot was a well-kept secret, and we cherished its exclusivity. That night, armed with a stash of beers, we lit a fire and enjoyed a quiet evening, a brochette, as we fondly called it. As the night deepened, time seemed to blur, and the alcohol started to take hold. Laughter echoed through the trees, one of my friends rolling on the leaf-strewn ground in mirth. Suddenly, the laughter died as we heard the unmistakable crunch of leaves and snapping branches in the distance. We hastily discarded our bottles into the lake, hiding the remaining beers in a backpack. The fire's glow made us visible, but we were far from the usual campus trails, deep in the heart of the woods. The sounds grew closer, and it felt like we were being circled. The atmosphere turned eerie, reminiscent of scenes from the Blair Witch Project. The continuous sounds of cracking branches and rustling leaves sent chills down our spines. We sat in silence, our laughter replaced by fear. Suddenly, a loud thud startled us. A branch had been hurled into our fire, scattering embers. One of my friends bolted, disappearing into the darkness. My remaining friend and I were left in shock, unsure if this was a prank or a genuine threat. Our confusion turned into terror when another branch struck my friend in the face. I helped him up, grabbed the backpack, and we sprinted towards the safety of our dorm. Reaching the road that separated the nature reserve from our dorm, we paused to catch our breath. The sound of footsteps approaching from the woods spurred us to continue our dash to the dorm. Once inside, we found our other friend safe in his room. Peering out of his window, we saw a figure pacing at the edge of the woods, disappearing whenever a car passed. But here's where the story takes a turn. Instead of the figure disappearing for good, we saw it suddenly dart towards the dorm. We locked the doors and huddled together, our laughter long gone. The figure reached the dorm, and to our surprise, it was another friend from our group, covered in leaves and dirt, laughing uncontrollably. It had been a prank all along, a tale to tell for years to come. We resumed our brochette, this time within the safety of our dorm, our laughter louder and hearts lighter. The next morning, we all agreed it was a night we would never forget, and we never ventured into the woods after dark again.